Hi, folks. You were Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about it's a headline that I saw in one of the big online media outlets. US American farmers are saying that the farming sector is just unsustainable. With I'm not sure what crops they're talking about here. I'm assuming it's fruit and vegetables, but I don't think it'd be broadacre farming like wheat or something. But they're claiming that the farming sector is unsustainable. It's all going to go. Americans are going to have nothing to eat, and so on, unless the Trump administration cuts them special slack to bring in masses of peasant workers from America and so on. So they need lots and lots of migration, but just for the farmers, just for them. And if there's no lots and lots of migration, Americans will never eat again, and they're all going to starve and die, and so on and so forth. Now, this sort of message and assertion is really happening wherever the globalists are in control, or trying to be in control, or want to be in control, and the globalists definitely want to control food supply. That the same message goes out, and it's an Armageddon threat. If you don't get rid of your coal-fired power stations, the whole world's going to die. Everyone's going to die. If you don't let mass peasant immigration in for the farming sector, everyone's going to starve. Yeah. So it's the same type of Armageddon, apocalyptic type messaging, just slanted in different ways. Now, is any of this true? Is any of it even remotely true? Is any of it? Can it be fair? Let's assume we accept the farmer's claim, just for the moment. So it's a bit of a stretch, but let's just assume that they're saying, well, look, we can't operate the farm efficiently unless we have slave labour. Okay, well then something's wrong with the farming sector. If you can only get by with slave labour, then there's something wrong here. Let's have a look at the economic modelling and structuring of the farming. It's not like they're little small lot farmers with a couple of acres down the back or something. Most farms are pretty decent size, unless they're very specialist, like they just grow a certain type of herb or something like that. But they're high value sort of items anyway. So let's just have a look at this. Is the sector viable? And if it needs third world slave labour to even get by or fall across the line, then it's not viable. And let's accept that and say, how do we structurally change the farming sector? But if you can't pay the basic wage, entry-level wage for workers, then what exactly are you doing wrong? And so that's again coming back to the economic modelling and the structural economics of the farming sector generally. I've got some experience here years ago. I mean, I was a kid. I was like, just it was the last holidays or a vacation in the final year of high school before the end of the year, and there was a guy I knew whose his parents had like a feral control, animal control thing, and like rabbits and feral pigs, that sort of thing. And he was part of that feral control thing. He said to me, "Oh, why don't you come along? It'd be fun." But I had no idea how it was. So along I went, and the farmer who contracted this feral animal control service. We got there and we were told to sleep in a shed. Now this is in winter. It was at the peak winter period, and it was fucking cold. And we were told to sleep in a shed, and the shed had, it wasn't secure. There was wind blowing through the thing. There was no running water. There was running water was outside, and there was no toilet. And so we were told that that's where you have to stay. I remember freezing my ass off the whole night, or a few nights, and the pay was okay if you're a high school kid. It was roughly in line, but much to my surprise, the farmer who fancied himself as a pretty tough dude, he said, "Okay, well, I'm paying you whatever the rate, the rate per hour was in those days, like $1 an hour or something it would have been back then. But and then deduction for accommodation. You call that accommodation? I mean, a wooden barn with holes in the wall and corrugated iron roof. And, are you kidding me? That's accommodation. And then the farmer may deduct, so I'll take off for accommodation. And then access to facilities, which was because you had to walk. I wasn't too far from where the thing was, but it was an outside water faucet tap, and that's where you had to go to get the water. And we had to bring our own things like gas powered little stoves if we wanted to have a cup of coffee or cook something, whatever. So now there was no toilet, so you had to kind of wander around and take a shit wherever you could find a sort of a somewhat secluded spot. The farmer then added another deduction, which was cleaning up the mess. Well, you guys are going to create a mess, so I've got to clean that up. And that's enough. So instead of getting $1 an hour, after the deductions, it was like 20 cents for the hour. So I'd calculated over I don't know how long it was, 4 or 5 days, something like that. I'd calculated I'd get $50 or something. But no, it ended up being not even $10 because of the deductions were made. So this is the sort of thing that farmers do. Now that wasn't bringing in crops or picking the apples or something. That was, as I say, feral animal control. And to be fair, I didn't do any of the feral animal controlling. There were guys, a couple of guys there fancied themselves as the experts, and they kind of did all that heavy lifting, and I did things like drive the 4-wheel drive while they did the shooting and everything. So now this is pretty much how it is today. What happens is the farmers, whether it be in Australia or whether it be elsewhere, they'll pay somebody the proper rate, which in Australia, I don't know what it is, $15, $16 an hour, something in that range. And but then they do the deductions for food, deductions for accommodation, and various other deductions. So $16 an hour very quickly becomes $3 or $4 an hour. So given that the farmer already has the buildings that the people are staying in, the workers are staying, the peasant workers are staying, all that, the food and all that infrastructure is pretty much there anyway, and a tax deduction. So the farmer's able to double dip. They're able to get a tax deduction and stuff, and then deduct it again from the workers' wages. So they're doing two dips on the tax deduction there in effect, and or their outgoings at the very least. So on the base, they're only paying these people $4 an hour. Now, there are a lot of peasant workers whose English may not be very good. Maybe they have little expertise. You need to have a foreman or an overseer of some sort directing the traffic. For example, if you're picking apples, you don't want someone picking the greenest apples that are, or the least ripe apples. Those apples need to stay on the tree for a bit longer. So there needs to be at least someone that can tell the difference between ripe and unripe, and some sort of expertise, I suppose, and if you can call it expertise, is helpful there. But the bottom line is that they just need cheap labor. That's what they want, cheap labor. No, I do understand that. Now, whether that's because of profitability, putting in the farmer's pocket, or whether it's the farming sector is just totally non-viable unless you're paying a quarter of the going rate, that we can debate. And again, it comes back to the structural economics of farming. But the reality is that the idea that it's an individual farmer or farming family having a farm, some little plot of land down the back there, that's not true. More and more, the farming land is being bought up by the big corporations, or particularly wealthy farming families that may have, several thousand acres of prime land and so on. So we're not talking small enterprises here. And some, even the enterprise that you think will be quite substantial and have a lot of mechanization, say, I don't know, strawberry farms, where they've got all sorts of sorting machines and boxing devices to box up the thing, because the big supermarket chains demand this and that, the next thing. So it's quite an investment some of these farmers have to make. And they say, gee, look at this investment I've made in equipment and a plant and whatnot. I've got to offset that big outlay by having cheap labor. So they're forced into the cheap labor, as they would see it, forced into the cheap labor side of things, because they've got to throw so many bucks at buying, again, sorting equipment, or in the case of fruit, say pulping, and things like canning, whatever. So now there's a huge workforce that's available already in these countries, in the Western countries, that could do the work. But the farmers are saying, well, look, these people, they don't want to suffer the privations of sleeping in a barn. They don't want the crap food that we offer, and they don't want, and they want those services provided, and they want to get the minimum wage, and they want this and that, and they want so and so. If it rains, they still, they can't go to work. They still expect to get paid, and all these sorts of things that the peasant migrant worker won't demand or expect or insist upon. And if there are any workers there that agitate or cause too much trouble there, then they're told, hey, get out of here. We don't want you. So how can we make the farming sector work without needing to bring in migrants? Now, my solution, if I was sitting in the Department of Agriculture in the United States, Secretary of Agriculture, and advising President Trump, I would put a few things on the table. One would be just bring in guest workers. If you're saying, well, the apple harvest, for example, orange harvest, apple harvest, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it might be, but fruit, the harvest season only lasts 6 to 8 weeks. So you bring in guest workers. Okay, you got a working visa for 2 months, 3 months, and then you go back. And what's wrong with that? Why does it have to be a migrant? Why just have a short-term work visa? That would achieve the same purpose. And if the worker is Jose is a good worker, or Raul is a good worker, then you say, well, look, you're quite welcome to come back this time next year. Or is there a planting season, then a harvesting season, or I don't know, whether you get the weeds out of the fields or something, whatever it is, then if you get a particularly notable good worker, then why not invite them back? Have the options of 3-month worker, then with a 3-month extension, if there's other work for them to do, but not as migrants. Can't bring them in as guest workers. Get them to rendezvous in Tijuana somewhere, and then you send a bus down to collect them, and then the bus drops them back at the end of their and if they're all sort of on the same thing, they're all arriving at give or take the same time, and then you can send the bus to collect them, and then the buses too, maybe, to take them back. Most of the farming are large enterprises. They're not the struggling farmer with the starving kids or something. They're not like that. So they've got the resources to do that. So short-term work visas would be an obvious. So why no one's talking about this is beyond me. The idea that it has to be a full-time migrant with the green card and the whole thing to come to the US, that's bullshit. That's not necessary. And I don't know why it's being proposed that it must either be nobody or it has to be a migrant, a legal migrant. That's crap, absolute crap. Short-term work visas will solve all the farmers' problems, assuming their problems are as they're claiming. Now, another way, and this is the way that I prefer, is that the workers, that local kid, final year of high school, early college, or anyone who's been unemployed for a certain amount of time, these sorts of things, they should be and paid the legal rate. The accommodation for them could be, it doesn't have to be a fucking 5-star hotel, but it could be improved. So at least it's not like the conditions that I experienced as a 17-year-old, where the gaps in the wooden shed in the cold winter's day, with the gaps in the wooden shed were like 2 inch gaps all over the place, freezing my ass off. There needs to be better accommodation than that. There needs to be internal latrines and running water and, basic, what we would term, I guess, as in the first world, basic facilities. There need to be that. Get portable toilets if need be, and that sort of, but at least have those facilities there. And then local people in the local area. If you look at the unemployment rate or the kids, college kids, all that sort of stuff, there's thousands of people in the local area that could do the work, and they all speak English, and they're likely to be a little bit more dedicated than some third world peasant, and they've got their they can be there for a few weeks doing the work, and then they can go back to their homes or back to their studies and their colleges or schools or whatever. That would be far and away the more desirable thing. So, but the farmers say, well, hold on, that means I've got to bear extra cost, the farmer says. I can't make that legally. I can't really make those sort of deductions, for accommodation of this or that, and pay them, a couple of bucks an hour. I'm just not going to get away with it. So why do I want those people when they may do a better job, but not by enough that it's going to offset the extra cost I have of upgrading facilities and then paying them more, and then not able to make those sorts of sleazy deductions that I make from the third world peasants pay. Okay, well, let's consider that. How I would do if I was suggesting or advising the president, and which I'm not, by the way, but if I were, I would say, okay, well, offer farmers accelerated write-downs. So, okay, if you've had to buy equipment, big ticket stuff, some of that farming equipment's expensive, whether it's the big harvesting machines or the picking machines or the canning machines, sorting machines, some of those are big bucks. So offer accelerated write-downs, or say, okay, if you employ local people, we'll offer you an accelerated write-down of wages. So instead of just being able to write off the wages as you pay them, will allow you 150% write-off on those wages. Some sort of seasonal type conditions and some control conditions for farms. Like in a broadacre farm, you probably wouldn't do it, but in, say, something that's more labour intensive to pick would be things like apples and oranges and stone fruit and so on. And then you would strawberries and whatever. Then you would have an accelerated write-down on the wages for local work. They must be local workers. And then that would offset the farmer there. So the farmer could employ local people and get an accelerated write-down, write off 150% of the wages, which then compensate them for not being able to employ slave labour. I would look at the farming economics overall, just structurally what's wrong, that you can only be viable if you've got third world peasants doing the harvesting. There's something fundamentally wrong there anyway. Let's investigate that. But I would deal with this through, got to use local people, and we'll offer you accelerated write-downs or greater levels of write-down on things like wages or capital equipment if you have to acquire them, or say upgrade to facilities, the barn that you're going to stick the young people in who are doing the harvesting. And I would approach it that way and keep it local. And then those local people, they pay local taxes, they spend their money locally, they don't send it, back to fucking Bolivia or somewhere. And then the wider, the wider cycle of benefit is then experienced into the economy. Now, the farmer would also claim, well, okay, we train up someone that then becomes a really good apple picker or something like that. But they're a college kid, they're studying to be a doctor or something. They're going to come back and work on the farm picking apples, for goodness sakes. Well, no, you will get them. They're doing a 5-year university course, and so the chances are pretty decent they can come back at least for a few years. So, but would you get any better deal out of some peasant anyway? Some third world peasant. So the harsh realities and practical realities need to play into this. Now, in terms of things like fruit picking, there are some pretty smart fruit picking machines, but they're quite expensive. And farmers, at least I've spoken to, why should I pay $1 gazillion for a fruit picking machine or I can get third world peasants that I pay shit money to do the fruit picking. The fruit picking machines need a lot of maintenance. They've got to have maintenance contracts. They're exposed to the elements while they're out there. I need to constantly change the workings of the machine. Where parts wear out quickly on those things. Got to replace them. It's an expensive business. It's still cheaper for me to get peasants and then get rid of them whenever I choose. So in the case, I would run competitions. Say, let's have a national competition for fruit picking machines in, picking apples or picking this or that or something. Let's make the effort. Let's try. Let's have $1 million prize to the winning design, and let's address that. If fruit picking is your issue, let's do what we can to address it. So I go down that path, but I don't see, or certainly from what I'm aware of, I don't see any effort in those things. The farmers lobby group, and they're very, very politicized. The farmers lobby groups are saying, okay, it's either cheap peasant third world labor or apocalypse. It's one or the other. And that's just bullshit. You've been with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.